In every era, one story stands out. A story that shapes destiny, reveals courage, and shows that greatness can come from the smallest moments. Before Alexander became the Great, before he conquered Persia, Egypt, and half of the world, he was just a 12-year-old boy. And his first victory wasn't against an army. It was against fear itself. This is the legend of how a boy tamed a wild, impossible horse, and how that moment changed history forever. Long before the rise of Rome, long before the deserts of Persia echoed with battles, there was a young kingdom in the north of Greece, Macedon. Its capital, Pella, was alive with markets, soldiers in training, and nobles planning campaigns. At the heart of this kingdom was King Philip II, a warrior king with one dream: to unite all Greek states under Macedon. And watching everything from the shadows was a bright-eyed boy named Alexander. Even as a child, people whispered that Alexander was different. He wasn't the strongest nor the loudest, but he had a fierce intelligence, an unshakable confidence, and an unusual ability to observe what others ignored. Unlike other princes who spent their childhood playing, Alexander walked the palace gardens with his tutor, Aristotle, asking questions about life, courage, and destiny. One summer morning, when the kingdom was buzzing with activity, a group of horse traders arrived from Thessaly, known across Greece for breeding the finest war horses. They brought with them one horse that stood apart, a towering, muscular black stallion. His mane was thick and wild, his eyes sharp like a hawk's. The traders boasted that this was the strongest horse in all of Greece. They called him Bucephalus, Bucephalus in Greek meaning ox head, because of the massive width and power of his skull. The traders were asking a massive price, far more than any war horse before. But the horse was beautiful, and King Philip, always hungry for greatness, agreed to test it. That decision would shape history. As soon as the stable hands tried to lead Bucephalus into the training ground, the air changed. The horse threw its head back, snorting violently. Ropes tightened. Men dug their heels into the soil. Yet the stallion dragged them forward like toys. When a soldier tried to mount him, Bucephalus reared on his hind legs, kicked the soldier to the ground, and almost trampled him. The crowd gasped. "This horse is cursed," shouted one of the men. Another spat in the dirt. "No one can ride that monster." King Philip frowned. His patience was thin. He was a man of war, not of wasted time. Another rider approached. Then another. Then another. Each one lasted barely seconds before being thrown aside. The horse was powerful. Too powerful, too wild, too aware. People began whispering that the traders were tricking the king. Philip grew furious. He slammed his staff against the wooden platform. "Enough, take that beast away." And then, from the corner of the field, a calm young voice spoke. "Father, he isn't wild, he's afraid." Silence swept across the training ground. Heads turned. Soldiers stepped back. It was Alexander. Just a boy, small compared to the soldiers around him, but standing tall in confidence. Philip narrowed his eyes. "Afraid," he repeated. "That creature, that monster." Alexander nodded. "He fears his own shadow, that's why he panics. Look." The crowd turned their eyes to the stallion, and they saw it. Bucephalus flinched every time the sun cast his shadow across his eyes. The boy had seen what dozens of grown men had missed. Philip shook his head. It doesn't matter, no one can ride him. Alexander took a breath. Let me try, he said. The crowd gasped. A 12-year-old boy. Ride that beast. Philip laughed. And what if you fall? If I fall, Alexander said, I will pay the full price of the horse myself. The crowd erupted in shock. This was more than a horse, this was a fortune. But Philip saw seriousness in Alexander's eyes. The king hesitated, then nodded. Very well, he said. Show us then. Alexander approached Bucephalus slowly. Not as a conqueror, not as a prince, but as an equal. The horse snorted, stamping its hooves. Alexander whispered softly, Easy, boy, I understand. He gently took the reins and turned Bucephalus toward the sun. So the frightening shadow disappeared behind them. The horse's breathing slowed. Alexander placed a hand on the horse's neck. Bucephalus flinched, then slowly relaxed. The crowd held their breath. Alexander spoke softly, walked beside the horse, then placed one foot in the stirrup. For a moment, the world froze. And then, Alexander swung himself onto the stallion's back. Gasps echoed across the arena. Bucephalus tensed, then exploded forward with a burst of speed. The horse galloped like a storm across the field. Wind blasted against Alexander's face. Soldiers shouted, expecting to see the prince thrown. But Alexander leaned forward, guided the reins gently, and whispered calm words into the horse's ear. Slowly, the wild speed softened. Bucephalus circled back, and when they finally stopped, the great stallion stood calmly, proudly beside the boy. He had chosen his rider. King Philip stepped forward, and for the first time in many years, tears filled his eyes. He looked at his son and said the words that would echo for centuries. My son, find yourself a kingdom big enough for your ambitions. Macedonia is too small for you. The crowd bowed in awe. A legend had begun. From that day on, Alexander and Bucephalus were inseparable. The horse allowed no one else to ride him. Together they trained in the hills, galloped through forests, and rode into mock battles. When Alexander became king at just 20 years old, Bucephalus stood beside him like a shadow. And when Alexander marched to conquer the Persian Empire, Bucephalus carried him over deserts, rivers, and mountains. In battle after battle, the horse charged fearlessly, through arrows, spears, chaos, and fire. Soldiers whispered that Bucephalus was no ordinary horse. He was chosen by the gods, or perhaps by destiny itself. Many years later, after crossing half the world, Alexander and his army reached India. There, during a fierce battle near the Hydaspes River, Bucephalus was gravely wounded. Alexander cut through enemies, desperate to protect his companion. When the fighting ended, Bucephalus collapsed. Alexander fell to his knees, tears mixing with blood and dust. He held the horse's head in his arms, the same horse he had tamed as a boy, the horse that carried him to glory. And there, in the fading light, Bucephalus drew his final breath. Alexander mourned like he had never mourned before. And to honor his companion, he founded a city on that riverbank, Bucephalus, named after the horse who changed his life. Historians still debate the exact location of the city, but its story lives on. Because sometimes The greatest monuments are not built for kings, but for friends. And so the story of Alexander and Bucephalus became more than a tale of a boy and a horse. It became a lesson that true greatness begins not with strength, not with power, but with understanding what others cannot see. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share, because more legendary tales are coming your way.